Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing very well and you're here to learn a lot more today. In the previous video, in the Python and Seaborn series, we looked at how to create a bar plot with annotations. If you haven't seen that video yet, I'll put a link up here. Make sure you go and watch that before watching this. But in today's video, we're going to be extending that to understand how we can create a line plot using Seaborn, and we will try to make it aesthetically good, put some annotations on it as well. And as usual, my task is to help you understand each and every line of code we're going to write. That's more important than just writing the code. All right, so to give you a gist, we're going to be taking the Titanic data set that's available with Seaborn. We're going to be using that and plotting a simple line plot along with some of the other stuff that we do there. If you are a beginner in Python, make sure you watch closely and understand each and every explanation. And I'm pretty sure once you see all the videos in my channel, you'll become good at it. So let's get straight to it and let's start. So first things first, I have a Google Colab notebook running. You are free to use either a Jupyter notebook, VS Code, Google Colab, anything that you prefer, right? So first things first, let's import the libraries that we need. All right. If you've seen my previous videos, you'll know that commenting is very important. So make sure you put your comments in every piece of code you're writing so people reading your code can understand. If not, it's as good as typing A, B, and C. So we're going to import two libraries. We're going to start by importing matplotlib first. So we're going to say matplotlib.pyplot as plt, and we're going to import Seaborn as SNS. So I'm going to give an alias to it and import them. Let's run the code. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to load the Titanic data set. All right. Now, obviously, you can do this with any data set. The Titanic data set is just easier and generally easier for everybody to understand, even if you're a beginner or not. That's why we're going to go ahead and use that. All right. We're going to give the name of the variable as Titanic, and we're going to load the data set into this variable, right? And just to make sure that it's been loaded, we'll just print the top 5 rows using the head function and run it. So once you have run that, we have loaded our Titanic data set into this variable called Titanic here. Head function allows us to view the top 5 rows. Just a quick fundamentals understanding. You can put the number of rows you want here and it will give you the number of rows as an output. It's basically for you to understand whether the data that you have is actually the one that got loaded in, right? So the next thing that we do is go straight and try and plot a line plot. So we're going to do this for a couple of variables that exist, or a couple of columns that exist in my data set. We're going to try to use class. That's primarily the passenger class, the class that people are traveling in. So you have first, second, and third. And we'll try to plot a line of the average fare for each class, just to get a glimpse of how expensive each class is, right? So we're just going to say fare versus class. So we're going to use sns.lineplot. So the line plot is the function that allows you to plot a line in Python. In Seaborn, you can see the different parameters that this line plot is able to take. We're not going to go into all of them today. We will look at some of these parameters in other videos, but for today, let's keep it straightforward. Let's say we need an x-axis first and foremost. So the x-axis is going to be class, because that's what I want on my x. And then the y is obviously going to be the fare, right? And Seaborn understands that fare is a continuous value, and hence it has to compute or aggregate the fare with a certain aggregation. So in this case, the default aggregation that it uses is an average. So we'll just make sure we stick to that. All right. Now what we got to say is, where is this data coming from? The X and Y. So this is coming from the variable called Titanic. If not, it will not understand where the data is coming from. All right. And we go ahead and run this simple line of code, and you should see a line plot that's been plotted like this with your confidence intervals in the shaded blue color here. All right. So that's something that we saw in the previous video as well. We can get rid of them. Go watch my previous video to know how to get rid of the confidence intervals. Okay. Now, let's try to first and foremost add some values to each of the points, because looking at the y-axis, it's very difficult to pinpoint and understand what the actual value is. For example, this could be 83, it could be 84, it could be 82. You don't know, right? That's why we need those values up there. Now, plotting values in Seaborn is not that straightforward. Hence, please pay attention to the next few minutes, as this will help you understand how to plot those points or annotations on the line plot, right? So let's say we're going to add annotations, right? All right. So first thing first is, I need to make sure I can go through each and every point that is plotted on the line. So here I have 3 points for first class, second class, and third class. So I got to loop through all these 3 points. And secondly, along with looping through all these points, I need to know where this point exactly is. What is the coordinates of those points? All right. So these are the two things that we'll try to get in our statement that we write here. So I'm going to initialize a for loop. So we have I, which is going to be our iterator, keeping track of which point is currently being accessed, whether it's the 0th point, the first point, or the second point. And then we'll get the actual coordinates of the point in the point variable, right? And then we're going to say in enumerate. So basically we are breaking down whatever we type here into the I and the point variable. So where do we get these two from? We will get these two from this plot, right? Whatever has been plotted here, we'll try to plug the information from those. So to do that, we'll say plt.gca, that is get current access, which is what has been plotted. So we're going to plug from those. What am I accessing on this axis? I'm accessing this line. How many lines do I have? I have only one line, right? So I'm going to say dot lines of 0, because I have only one line. So I'm accessing the 0th line. Again, Python starts its indexing from 0. That's why we put in 0 here. If you wanted to access the first line, if there were more than one, you would say 0 or 1 or 2 or 3, right? And then what else do I need? I need the XY coordinate of each of those points. So I'm going to say get XY data, which is basically the simple function to get the XY coordinates, and then put a colon. Now we need to plot the actual values. So we're going to say plt.gca.text. So text is going to be the function we use to plot our values. All right. Where do we want to plot it? So let's put the coordinates. So point of 0, point of 1. All right. So for every point, I'm going to cycle through. 0 and 1 will give me the X and Y coordinates of that point. It's stored in this point variable here. That's what we are accessing, right? The next thing is, what do I want to plot? I want to plot the actual value. So what is the actual value? The actual value is the value on the y-axis, all right? Because my x-axis is just first, second, and third column. So let's put a string, because we need to make sure it's a text. I want to control how many decimal points we have. So we're going to put a round function to control that. I'm going to say point of 1, because 1 is basically the value on the y-axis, 0 is basically the value on the x-axis. And I'm going to say I want to keep only 2 decimal places, right? So that gives me the value I want to plot or I want to annotate. And then if you want to add some additional parameters to control where this value goes, you can say the horizontal alignment should be center and the vertical alignment should be the top or bottom, right? So I'm just going to say bottom, so it's closer to the point as much as possible. All right, this is very straightforward. Hope you guys understood that. So let's try to run it. And also you can pause the video at this point, make sure you type it out on your own Jupyter notebooks, and you can also try to run it, right? See whether you get the values there. Okay, so as we saw here, we ran the code, we got an error, but it said that, hey, this error that my value has no attribute string, right? Now, these are errors that you will come across whenever you try to write any piece of code. Okay, I put this in deliberately to tell you how we can also correct errors that we have or errors that we get. Now, it's telling me the error is a numpy.float64 object has no attribute string. Now, the reason is I've put a dot here instead of a comma. So it tried to do 0.1 dot string. So anything that is not in the right place, if it gives an error, just try to identify what has gone wrong and where I need to correct it. Typically, the error is either on or before the point of error, right? And then let's try to run it again. Okay, so you see a small issue can give you a very big error you might not understand, but don't panic. It's very easy to solve the error if you know where to look, right? So once we have corrected the error, we have seen that it actually puts the values here. So you have 84.15, we could have never guessed, 20 and 13, and that's basically how you can plot the values. Now what's missing? A couple of things like the title, the X labels, the Y labels. This is what's missing. So let's try and add those in. So we'll say plt.title. Again, it's quite intuitive. So we can say this is average fare by passenger class. We can give a font size to it. So we can say probably 14. That will make it large enough to know what the title is. Then we can put our X label. So what is the X? Passenger class, right? So passenger class, we can give a font size of say about 10. And then we have the Y label as well. What's the Y label? That's the average fare. So we can give a font size again. Okay. All right. And at the end, to show this on the plot, we just say plt.show. So everything gets consolidated onto the same plot. Let's run it again. Let's see whether we get all of the elements on the plot. So once we've put that in, we see we've got the title here. We've got all the values. We've got average fare, passenger class as the X and Y labels. So very crisp and clear. You don't want the column names to come on the plot because sometimes the column names, could be anything, may not actually be what's there. So it's always better to put the labels in here. Now, there are a lot of other things you can do to make this better, like change the color of the line, add a grid, change the limits on the y-axis, for example, because now you don't have a limit on the top. You can define those. You can change the type of line to make it a dotted line, to make it a line with kind of a different character like X or O, things like this. We'll see all of that in the next video, but just to summarize what we did, we imported the required libraries, which is matplotlib and Seaborn. We then went on to import our Titanic dataset. We said we're going to be looking at 2 columns and try to plot those 2 columns as a line. We have plotted those on the line plot. We have added annotations and the required title and X and Y labels. All right. So I'm going to be creating another video to show you all the other aesthetics around line plots. But in the meantime, make sure you are able to run this code. Tell me in the comments if you have successfully run it. And if you want to see anything else on a line plot, make sure to watch some of the other videos to understand the Seaborn library even better. So thank you very much for watching. And if you have liked the content, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And also make sure you learn from all the errors and mistakes that you do. That's the best way of learning, right? So take care and stay safe, and make sure to watch the next video to learn even more about Seaborn and Python. Thank you.